What's something you thought only happened in movies until it happened to you? Having an accident and the first person to arrive says, "I'm a doctor." Don't worry. I was playing hockey and took a puck to the neck and couldn't breathe for a few seconds. A guy from the other team dropped down beside me and said, "I'm a doctor." Don't worry. After a few seconds of shock I was able to breathe and talk again, confirming I would be okay. But as we were skating off the ice he said, "I'm glad it wasn't serious. I'm a chiropractor." Edit, a word. You know how you see those raging house parties in movies that seem completely unfeasible in real life? Yeah. My neighbor throws one every year for Halloween. Including hired bartenders, fired dancers, a full-blown DJ stage, and abrigs spread throughout the house. Once got invited to a party at my friend's cousin house in the California high desert. It was on a Wednesday, like 2 days before Christmas. Now, the area was relatively rural, very quiet, a depressing desert city, basically. And, again, it was a Wednesday and a couple days before Christmas. What kind of whack party is this? Open the door and there is shoulder-to-shoulder crowds of people drinking, passing around blunts, playing beer pong. Every classic party cliche you could imagine. Woke up on the couch in the morning next to my soon-to-be ex-GF and there was just people passed out everywhere. It was like I walked right into a movie. I watched two blind people, strangers downtown, run into each other. It just seemed so random. One had a dog and one had a cane. I was trying to think of something to say, but "Hey, you're both blind and about to run into each other" seemed rude. So I just watched it in slow motion and felt like an asshole. Driving from El Paso to Georgia. Shortly after my journey began, I saw one of those signs that said, "Next gas station." Holy, that's a large number, miles. I saw that in the middle of nowhere, Canada. It looks even larger in kilometers. When I went to America I found out the yellow school bus thing was real and not just a movie thing. It never occurred to me yellow school buses were an American thing. Dating a nerdy awkward girl in high school that goes on to be a model later in life. I hope you didn't stop dating her in high school. I did stop. Unfortunately. I knew this guy that was down on his luck in high school and had lost faith in hard work ever paying off. I told him I was determined to find him a 4-leaf clover. Searched every day in this big field of clovers by my house. Did this for weeks and then off and on for months. A year went by but I never truly gave up and would occasionally go out looking. I even prayed to God I'd find one because the guy really seemed to have faith in me, proving to him that working for something and believing in yourself pays off. Near the end of senior year, I had pretty much given up, but would still kneel down to look at clover patches in occasion. Then one day, my sister comes in and says if I saw our pond. We have a huge pond. It's more like a small lake. I said no. And she says there are tons of 4-leaf clovers. So I go running out and there are thousands of them everywhere. Nothing but 4-leaf clovers. I gave one to the guy and he was seriously moved. He got into the military and every now and then he sends me a pic of the clover. He always keeps it with him. This legit happened to me in April. My first thought was this is some dumb movie. It had been seeing this girl for a few weeks and we had a hotel by Big Sur. She went through my phone while I was sleeping and my most recent texts were 3 girls. If she had bothered to read them she would find I often use my personal cell phone for work. I work in it, and I was helping them with problems. But nope. She slams the phone down and runs to her car as I say I can explain. But she just drives off to her parents who lived nearby and never answered her phone. I didn't really continue to try to get a hold of her because I really don't want to be with someone that reacts that way anyway. Random acts of kindness among strangers. One time I was broke and on the verge of being homeless in Vegas. Staying at a pay-by-the-week motel in a bad part of the city. I was due to be kicked out the next day and didn't have any way to pay the $200 for another week. I was talking to some people on a local chat and mentioned it and one guy offered to give me the money. I was sure he'd want something for it. You know. But I had nothing to lose, so I met him at a fast food place nearby and the guy just handed me $300. Told me the extra 100 was so I could eat for the next week. Too. And then just said to be safe and drove away. Never saw or heard from him again. Landing the girl of your dreams. Had the biggest thing for a pretty pale chick in my geometry class freshman year. Made some moves that all flopped. She was quiet and all mysterious, which made me just crazier for her. Moved on, but never stopped digging her. Most beautiful girl ever. Then one day, over a year after I graduated, I was depressed and alone. Figured I'd hit her up on Facebook because I had nothing left to lose. Got to know each other. Turns out she's just extremely shy and socially awkward. After some months of being friends, I asked her on a date that she tried to persuade me that I wouldn't like her. My 5-year obsession wasn't about to lose that debate. Now we're engaged. I love her so much. High-speed crashes resulting in an epic ducking car flip. Coming home from a night out and entered from an on-ramp and went full speed into the center divide. SUV then did an epic kickflip before landing on its roof. Luckily everybody in the vehicle was okay. One time a very large, rotund co-worker of mine slipped and started rolling head over heels down a really steep hill towards me. I felt like I was Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. In high school, I had an assignment due for extra credit. I left it on the table in the living room so that I wouldn't forget it, as well as look over it in the morning. The morning of, I noticed it wasn't there. I asked my mom if she moved it. She hadn't. I walk over next to my dog who has half my essay hanging out his mouth. I made him watch as I threw away all of his treats. TLDR, dog ate my homework. My friend died when we were 20. I would be out in public and I would see her. Then I would get closer and realize it was just someone that looked like her. It happened pretty often. I guess I just missed her, so my brain made me see her. I had always thought it was just a movie thing. There's so many times I've seen patients I've worked on and later pronounced as dead in public. Or people I've known personally that I have taken from where they've died and a couple years later see them in a crowd or in passing. It's strange. Feeling like you can't breathe when you're grieving a close loss. It sounds so cliche. They say it all the time in movies and on TV. And then you experience it and it's exactly the way they say. I'd lost people before. But always older. Kind of expected. Recently there was a sudden loss in our family of someone much younger and I'm still trying to process it. After the first few weeks it got easier. But sometimes out of nowhere I find myself feeling like there's suddenly no air. Screaming out in anguish from emotional pain after finding out that my son was dead in my belly. I couldn't help it. I feel sorry for the people who heard me. I wailed and cried and said nonsensical it for about 5 minutes. Then I got my big girl panties on and went to the hospital that covered my insurance over an hour away. America. This is fantastic and I remember it fondly. I hated this guy in one of my classes. He was pretentious and always acted like he had something to prove. I used to draw caricatures of him in class while he yammered on and on. At the end of the semester, our professors had a party during which a few of us got tipsy. Come to find out that outside class this guy's actually fairly chill and quite witty and funny. I had made a big show of hating on him, so it felt weird to end up at a bar chatting with him. We walked out and parted ways despite some obvious mutual attraction. I was almost to my car when I said duck it, turned, and ran full tilt into his arms. We kissed passionately on the street while bar patrons looked on. Even though we eventually broke up. It was my most Hollywood moment. Being carried away by a crowd. We were doing active shoot-to-live drills and a bunch of otherwise perfectly calm and intelligent people mass stampeded the moment the first simulated shots rang out. They ran straight towards the gunshots. And I only survived because someone tripping and falling created a mass of tangled people on the ground that let me break free and run out a disabled fire exit. I expected more from my colleagues. The worst thing was, though, That if I hadn't heard the first gunshot so clearly I would have just been another part of that crowd. Stepped on a rake. It wasn't an accident. I just wanted to see if it would actually happen. Quite painful for my 10-year-old forehead. Sigh. I did the same thing when I was a young kid. Also pissed on an electric fence. Not at the same time. Not proud of it. But it helps knowing I wasn't alone in doing it. I saw a truck crashed in a pond. Watching it sink was like watching a movie. Slowly going down and then suddenly pulled under. There was a sucking sound and a bunch of bubbles gurgled up. And then nothing until a bunch of stuff that was in the truck floated up to the top. It was awesome. Was the stuff people? No. He escaped. Not that he wanted to. It was a DUI and he at first refused to get out of the truck and then he wasn't going to get out of the pond. My sergeant almost drowned going in after him. Then that DUI called me a lot of mean names while I tried to keep his arm straight. He had a large IV in his arm and he kept trying to bend his arm. Once stepped on a banana peel on the sidewalk just to see what would happen. Leg flew out from under me exactly like in the movies. Next thing I know I'm on my ass on the sidewalk telling my wife holy it. Those things are slippery. And you can imagine the look she was giving me. Minding my own business in a bank and boom armed robbery. No, I didn't turn into Batman or anything else cool. I continued filling out paperwork. It wasn't a grand heist from Payday. It was a town drug user with a kitchen knife. My wife and I went to Nick for the first time a couple of years ago during the summer. We were there in August during a heat wave. We were staying at an Airbnb in the Bronx. And as we were searching for it, we were driving through neighborhoods where the fire hydrants were spewing water throughout the streets. Children were playing in the water like it was no big deal. Literally filling water balloons with the pressure coming from it. I thought that was only a thing from Hey Arnold. But apparently it is a totally normal thing during heat waves in Nick. Seeing that one special girl that is everything you could dream of in a woman and more. Far out of your league and you know it. Until one day she initiates talking and making moves on you while you think this can't be happening. I married that girl about a month ago. Stuck in standstill traffic. Took the first lane I could, which is not the one I need. I know trying to get over is going to be a pain. Until I see the person in the car next to me is my brother and he knew I would need over. He rolled his window down and told me to get in front and we gave each other updates on what we knew was going on. But that timing was amazing. Really awkward, my grandpa heard me having sex. Loudly. For a very long time when my BF and I hooked up for the first time. I brought him back to my place. Which was a guest house behind my grandparents' house. It was quite a night. The next morning I checked my voicemail. There were several messages from him. And they are: "Hey. You okay? Thought I heard something. Love you. Are you alright? Do I need to call the cops? Just call. I'm coming back there to check on you. Answer the door." And that was the last message. There was no knock. He didn't even get on my porch before he knew that I was praying to God. The next morning, BF and I listened to the messages in horror. We'd both been a little drunk. And it got amazingly out of hand. We never heard the phone. We never heard anything. BF and I left to go back to where we'd left his car the night before. Because safety. And my guy introduces himself to Grandpa. Not blinking. I think he was a little proud of himself. And I think Grandpa respected that we never talked about it. Yeah. Awkward sex moment with your parents. Someone actually having a crush on me. Being in a fire and getting your face black with ashes. I always thought it was bad makeup. I was driving home from work on a rainy night when I saw a white work van driving all crazy and very fast. I slowed down and let him pass me because I was worried he would swerve in my lane and hit me. 4-lane highway. I watch him drive erratically down the road. And it is pouring. All of a sudden he swerves. Skids off the highway. Then did a 360 in the air before landing in a ditch. on all four wheels on the side of the highway. It was like watching a bad movie scene. I've never seen a car flip in the air before or since. Especially because of the dark and rainy aspect. I pulled over, called 911, and gave a statement once the police arrived. The worst part about it was that he had two teens in the back of the van who weren't strapped in. But they survived. I've been a cop for about 3 years now in a mid-sized town. Responded to a robbery a while back where a witness said I missed them by a second or two. I go the direction the witness pointed me toward and I send another team the opposite direction just in case. Suspect came out the shadows in the alleyway and shot my buddy in the heart. His vest caught the bullet and he's okay. We caught the guy a few minutes later. Sometimes I feel like I'm living a bad buddy cop film. Talked to this gorgeous girl at a party for hours. We had a great time. Played drinking games. Told jokes. Both of us were laughing. We had the same interests. It was great. No bullet either. We seemed like peas and carrots. Eventually she said she had to go leave with her friends and I was too nervous at the time to ask for her number. She said goodbye and walked to her waiting friends in their car across the street from the party. I moaned to my friends about letting her get away and they said come on dude. Go after her, so I said you know what. Duck it, downed my beer and ran to the fence in the backyard we were in. Jumped it. And sprinted to her car that was still parked at the corner at the end of the street. I could literally hear the corny rom-com music playing in my head as I ran to her. Slid smooth right up to the car. Knocked on the door. And her friend opened it. Out of breath. Panting. I poked my head in the back seat and said hey. I got asked. What's your number? The music in my head was at a crescendo at this point. And then she responds I have a boyfriend. Every note in my head immediately shut off. I stared at her. She stared at me. Her three friends in the car stared at both of us. I just silently did an about face and walked away. I swore I was in a comedy film in that moment. While backpacking the Appalachian Trail, the AT is a 2,100-mile trail that runs along the crest of a mountain range in the eastern US. I often had to leave the trail to resupply. One day, in Southwest Virginia, I hiked down a gravel road that left the forest near a town. I was maybe 5 miles from the edge of the forest when this beat-up old Camaro came around a bend ahead of me, spraying up a big rooster tail of gravel. I stepped to one side to let it pass, but the driver slammed on the brakes and stopped beside me. There were a bunch of teenagers riding in the car, all wearing bathing suits. Lots of itty tattoos. Everybody holding a can of beer. The driver said, "This man looks thirsty." And one of the kids in the backseat reached me a cold one from the cooler. We talked for a couple minutes about the trail, and the weather, and the wild turkey, the animal, which they hunted, not the whiskey. Then the other kid in the backseat fired up a joint the size of a camel wide and passed it around. And the guy in the passenger seat held it out the window and cocks an eyebrow and asked, "You want this?" And I did, but I was also overwhelmed by a feeling of deja vu. I had seen this happen before. In 8th grade. It was the plot of a movie from the DARE program. Concerning the dangers of reefer. It's not every day you get to be in a movie. So I toked up. And we drank another beer. And then the driver said they had to get up to the lake and sped off. Based on how the original film went, I assume they all perished from the weed. I walked to an all-you-can-eat buffet and ate a lot.